As you may already know, I am the Montreal City Manager for Go Running Tours. You can book a run in Montreal on the Go Running website, and I will turn up to be your tour guide while we run together. In fact, sometimes, if you're really lucky, Liz will actually turn up because she does backup services for me. Well, one evening I was in the city to run with a chap called Michael Long. We had a great 20K run and chatted about the city, and running, and travel, and everything and anything. I mentioned that I was a co-host of a podcast called Running Book Reviews. And he said, "Oh, I wrote a book about running in different places of the world. I'll send you a copy." I thought, and I said, "I have a better idea. Send us 2 copies and we'll read it and we'll cover it in our podcast." So here we are. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners, to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to try something new or different. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk with author Michael Long about his book, The Mock Olympian.
Inspired by the 2012 Olympics, Michael, the author, embarked on a journey to run in every Olympic city, 23 in total, before the 2016 Olympics. Although he tried to combine trips if he was in a particular corner of the world, his goal required a lot of travel and even a month off once it was time to go to LA and Mexico City, which luckily Michael's employer approved. The book is divided into 25 short chapters. The first 2 chapters are general background about how the idea came about and a little about Michael. The 23 remaining chapters are dedicated to each of the 23 Olympic cities. A little bit about Michael Long. Michael Long started running later in life after he realized he could no longer call his excess weight baby fat in his late 20s. Even though he started running later, he accomplished quite a few fast times in various distances, including a half marathon around 1:20. So that's 80 minutes. Although he was working in London during the 2012 Summer Olympics, Michael has lived in many other cities, including Athens, Brussels, Perth, Newcastle, and Sydney. Michael loves to travel and has been to over 75 different countries. He loves traveling so much that he studied tourism in university and has been in the industry ever since. So welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So I guess the first question is, what made you decide to write this book?
Good question. So I guess as you were mentioning just then, I got quite into running later on in my 20s. It had all started actually from I did a half marathon, the Great North Run in Newcastle. That was my first race that I ever did when I was 26. I think I was nearly 27. And then after that, I kind of found this kind of like new enjoyment of fitness and working up towards a challenge. So I kind of thought I'll do one each year. I'll do something different. So I did a few different things, like I did the London to Brighton bike ride in the UK, in England. It's about 50 miles. Then I signed up to cycle from London to Paris for an organization. And then I thought, I wonder if I could run a marathon. And so in 2010, I then signed up to do the Athens marathon. And I trained for that, sort of going from not really being a runner again. I hadn't really done a race since that 4 years before the Great North Run. So it was kind of like starting from scratch. And so I trained for that. I went out to Athens. I did the race. I really enjoyed it. And then after that, I just came back and I thought I'll enter races in London and just kind of keep my fitness and motivation kind of going. And then it just sort of became part of just my being, I guess. So it's kind of like having a shower now is I have to go for a run most days. And so that had kind of happened. And I was always a big fan of the Olympics. I was born in Athens. And so the 1988 Olympics was the first one I truly sort of remember, when it was in Seoul. I was 8 years old at the time. And since then, I'd enjoyed watching them. I was very excited then to kind of be living and working in London when the London 2012 Olympics was happening. The lead up was fantastic, the atmosphere. I was lucky enough to get tickets to various different events. So it's just been a phenomenal time to kind of be in the city. And during that time, it was actually my birthday. And a friend of mine had said, very English, he said, "Why don't you come over for tea? And I'll make cakes and tea, at my house, and we'll sort of celebrate your birthday one evening after work." And I did that. It was very lovely. A few of us kind of went round, and she gave me a couple of presents. And one of them, as I opened it, was Time Out's guide to the Olympics, the Summer Olympics. And it goes through chronological order of like where they've all been hosted since the initial one of the modern games in Athens in 1896. And as I opened it, my friend's partner, he said, I on the first page it was Athens, and I said, "Oh, that's where I finished my first marathon. That's where my first big race was, in that stadium, is where it finishes, having run from marathon into the city of Athens." And he said, "Oh yeah, but all the travel you do and all the races, like you've probably run in all of the places, all of the cities." And I kind of flicked through the book, and then I was like, "No, I haven't. Like I haven't run. I've been to quite a few of them, but I haven't run or raced in them." And I kind of forgot about that for a little while. And then we enjoyed the rest of the Olympics. And then we had the closing ceremony, and me and my partner, we'd kind of decided, let's go out and celebrate, have dinner and cocktails in London. We'll treat ourselves to staying in a hotel, and things like that, and it'll be a great end to the Summer Olympics. And as I went to work on that Monday, I then was kind of sat there, and I felt quite blue, really, to be honest. I was kind of like, oh, it's all over, and like what to do next. And I thought back to what my friend's boyfriend had said, and I thought, you know what? No, I haven't raced in them all, and that's what I'm going to do. And so that day, then I decided I'm going to start a blog, and I will race in every single city that's hosted the Summer Olympics. And I'll start now, which is the end of London 2012, and I'll aim to finish in Rio in 4 years' time when they host the 2016 Summer Olympic Games. And so that's how it kind of happened, I guess. That was the sort of build up of like how I got into running, but then possibly off the back of a hangover was when I was then thinking, I need to do something big. What shall I do? And that's how I came up with it.
Yeah, it's really cool that it was actually a book that inspired you to do something that ended up being a book as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I hadn't at the beginning, I hadn't necessarily envisaged that it would be a book. I kind of just set the blog. So my original blog was just called Run All the Olympics. And I kind of, it's still live today. You can go back and you can see that day that I set it, that I started it and decided, yes, I'm going to do one in all of these different cities. And it was only as I got a little bit of the way through, I think it was whilst I was in Rome, and I can't remember which number city that was in the order of the book itself, but that's when my other half had said, actually, I think maybe you could actually extend it and not just have it as a blog, but maybe think about like writing something longer that would be a book. So yeah, hadn't initially intended out, but I think that's also quite nice that it organically transpired into that.
So that's a commitment to a hell of a lot of travel in a 4 year period. Did you figure, well, that's all my vacations and I'll do that? Or you work in the travel industry, I know. So did you get some help from the fact that you work in the travel industry? Do you get some free travel, or were you financing yourself?
So unfortunately, no free travel. I was lucky enough to be able to combine some of the trips with some work trips that I was actually doing as well. So I had kind of thought this is going to like dominate lots of my holiday and vacation times. Luckily, I had also been working at the organization for quite a long time. So I was actually then on a slightly more, I got some extra days once I'd passed like a certain number of years service. So that was useful as I kind of went into this project. But one in particular, so the role that I was in at the time, I was managing a lot of our Scandinavian partnerships and things like that. And I'd gone over for some work meetings. I think it was in Oslo, actually. We had like a meetup with all these different clients. And I was telling them that I'd started this thing, and Stockholm and Helsinki were two of the cities that I was going to have to race in. And so the Swedish client was like, well, in September, we have the Stockholm half marathon is on this date. And then my Finnish client was in the conversation as well, was also like, and we have a half marathon the following weekend in Helsinki as well. And so then I was like, okay, so our next client meeting, how about I come over to Stockholm, do that race, then we'll work for 2 days in Sweden, then I'll fly to Finland. We'll do our kind of client meetings in Finland for the remainder of the week, and then I'm already there then for the next race. So I was lucky in that sense that I could combine some things in that. And then Liz, you mentioned at the beginning that I was lucky enough to take a month off. And actually that happened because I was hitting my 10-year anniversary at the organization. I still work there today, so I'm 17 years now. But when I was coming up to 10 years,
do you want to give them a plug? We're okay with that. If you want to give them a plug, you don't have to be.
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind saying. Yeah, it's Expedia. Expedia Group is where I work. So I was coming up to 10 years there, and I remember at the end of like my annual review, I'd kind of done that with my manager, and she said, "Is there anything else that you wanted to like chat about, like now, like relation to your career aspirations and things like that?" And I said, "Well, actually, I'm going to be turning 10 years at Expedia on this given month next year, and I was wondering if I would be able to take 5 weeks off. I'll take 2 weeks holiday and then 3 weeks unpaid leave." And I didn't expect it there and then. Actually, she was like, "Yeah, I don't see why that would be a problem." She said, "To be honest, I thought you were going to ask for 3 months." And I was like, "I should have, like maybe I should have done. I should have, and then I could have done more things all at once." So that's where then I did have this 5 weeks, which was, as you mentioned, part of the other races that I did when I did a road trip around some of the southern states of America. And then I combined it with a race in St. Louis, which is one of the most, I feel like it's one of the cities that people are kind of like, St. Louis, they hosted the Olympics. It's a bit more of a surprise to people. And then I went down to Mexico for a few weeks, and then included my Mexico City race there. So yeah, lucky that I could, my work were very flexible in that sense, and I did combine some of my work trips, but then yeah, the rest was purely planning holidays around races and where do I need to get to and weekends away and things like that.
So I guess I guess with 3 years left until your 20-year anniversary, maybe you need another goal so you can take another 5 weeks off or something.
All the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was thinking that, and now I know to go into the conversation saying, so I'm thinking of taking 3 months off. So it's like, start higher, right?
Right, exactly. So actually, before we get into like all the cities and your actual adventures, you started the book by mentioning that you were there when London put in the bid to host the Olympics for 2012. I don't know if you want to explain some of that, because like, you mentioned that you actually set up a petition because you really wanted London to be able to host the Olympics, and you got people to sign. How does that all work?
Yeah, so it wasn't me that set up the petition. It was just me that was kind of like really plugging it and things. So yeah, it was in 2005 when that was when they put the bid in, and it was going to be announced later that time. And there was a website that the team, I guess, that were putting in the bid and running it. They had backthebid.com. And so I had stickers for that on my living room window and stuff, like out onto the street. And then I remember sending it round to all my teams and all my networks to kind of like say, will you please sign it? I do remember one of my colleagues like sort of shouting over the desk going, I've done it for you, Michael, because you said it's really important to you, although I'm not happy that it means my taxes are going to go up because I'm going to have to pay for the hosting of the Olympics in the city I live and work in. But they did do it. And so that's where I'd been very passionate about wanting the Olympics to be in London. I guess my first experience of that had actually been when I still lived in Greece. So I lived in Greece from when I was born in 1980 to 1990, and in 1990 that's when or just before, it was probably about 1989, that's when they had put the bid in at Athens to host the 1996 Olympics, because it was going to be the centenary. And that was my first experience. I think there is a picture in the book, maybe, of me wearing a t-shirt when I am like 9, and it says Athens, bid city for 1996. Now, unfortunately, they didn't win that time, so my campaigning wasn't successful first time round. But when it came to London, they were successful, of course, in 1995. And I do remember the time it was announced. It was around a lunchtime. The office that I worked in, it was a different organization at the time. We all kind of went out into the reception to watch on the big screen where we kind of had like a TV, where they then announced that London was going to be successful. So yeah, it was a good moment.
In all fairness, like, you were only 10 the first time, so you know, I think you can forgive yourself.
Yeah, you didn't have quite the leverage.
Yeah, exactly.
Your network wasn't as big.
It wasn't as big. I didn't have the internet. I didn't have as many colleagues to hassle. Yeah.
Okay, so you've just committed yourself to a 4-year, fully all-in program of traveling around places that are now defined and based on sporting events, probably. And you through the story, you seemed at the time you have a partner, Steve.
Yes.
So what did he say when you said, "Oh, well, no vacations for the next 4 years, or you have to come running with me"?
Or is he a runner?
He's not a runner, no. He likes to watch, and he's got very good at tracking me in terms of time and knowing where, like, planning routes of, like, I know he'll be at this point by that point, and I should then move here. So he's got that down to an art. He's more of a tennis player himself, so that's his sport. But yeah, I think, like, when I came up with it, I think he was very excited because he was kind of thinking, great, they're all amazing places. Love to go to them all. So he did come on quite a lot of them, not all of them, because that would have meant that he would have needed the times off and things like that. But he also worked in travel, and was able to kind of come on quite a few of them. And he's actually Australian as well. So then when the two cities in Australia that I had to then go to, so Melbourne and Sydney, that was also a good chance for him to visit friends and family back home as well for him. So yeah, he was pretty excited that they were all nice places to visit, and it also gave him a chance to explore places that potentially he wouldn't have gone to before. So I think actually with Rio was a place that he kind of had not really been on his sort of roadmap of places that he thought I'd really want to go there over other places. But actually, when we were there for the 5 days of the time that we made a trip down there, and I had the race, he really enjoyed it and, like, recommends it to everyone. So it was a chance for him to discover new places too.
That's
Well, it's
amazing.
good, just as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess maybe we can start with how you started running in the first place. Like, you did mention that you started with the Great North Run.
Yeah.
And then you just let it consume your soul after that.
Yeah, so I think when I was younger, I similar to you, I'd been more of a swimmer when I was sort of like in my early teens to mid-teens. So I'd competed quite a lot at that, at different events and things. And I also played field hockey. That was another thing that I had done in my sort of like school time. And then after school, I didn't really, at university, I didn't really necessarily do sport as such. So I'd kind of like let all those kind of like go. And then it was with a group of friends who I went to university in Newcastle, which is in the northeast of England, which is where the Great North Run is held each year. And so that's where I went to university, and there were 3 other friends that we used to still meet up and have weekends away together and stuff. And one of them, she had done the Great North Run. I think she'd done it twice already at this point. And she'd emailed us, the 4 of us, or the other 3, kind of then saying, hey, I've entered the ballot for the Great North Run again. Here it is, like, if you wanted to give it a shot. And we all entered into the ballot. And kind of, I don't know, I didn't really think about it that much. I just was like, oh yeah, well, sure. Like, she said it's fun and said it's a great experience, and she's entering for another time. And then, ironically, the three of us that had not done it before, not really considered it, only entered it because she had sent us the link. We all got a place, and then the original friend, she didn't. So it was
Oh,
us three that then got them, and then we're like, oh no, like what are we? We're gonna have to like actually train and stuff. And she was very supportive, and actually, so that's how I then got into doing it because I had to then train for the Great North Run, and I really enjoyed it. And then I did fundraising a cancer charity at that time as well, and that's what then made me think I want to do something different each year. And so I did a few different bike rides. I did a triathlon. And then it was only in 2009, so I guess like 3 years later, that then I kind of thought, actually, maybe I could do a marathon one day. And I thought, if I'm going to do one, because let's face it, that's all I'm going to ever manage. I'll never be able to do anything more than that. And I decided I'll do the Athens one because that's where I was born. It's very historical in terms of being the original one running from Marathon to Athens. I hadn't been back to Athens since I was 18. So all these things kind of like just combined to then go, right, I'll train for that one. And I went out to Athens. My parents, they were still alive at the time, and they came with me for the weekend as well, which was really fun to go back to places that we'd visited. And we went back to my school and things like that. I remember at the end of the Athens Marathon, I was kind of sat on the ground, sort of like taking a moment, like because the queue to get your bag from like the bag reclaim thing was absolutely massive, and I was like, oh, I can't stand up for all of this. I'm just going to sit down for a moment and just chill. And there was a woman who started talking to me, and she was from America. She traveled over to Athens to run the marathon. And she said, "Oh, how many marathons have you done?" And I was like, "Oh, no, this is it. Like, I've just done it today, and that's me done now." And she was like, "Oh, maybe give it like 15 minutes, and you'll start planning another one." And I was like, "No way, that's not happening. I won't." And then, sure enough, as you've kind of read, and I'm in training again now for another marathon. So I guess, yeah. 12 years later, I'm still kind of doing that thing. And sometimes I catch myself being that voice that she was to me when there was a person on my team recently did their first marathon. I think I did say to them at one point, oh, well, once you've done it, like maybe you'll see about like where else you want to do. And at the time they were like, no, this is it. And when they came back, sure enough, from their marathon a month or so ago, they were like, oh, I'd quite like to do maybe one more, see if I can beat my time. So yeah, I found that now my role has changed into where I am in that conversation.
Yeah, I can give up any time that I want. I'm not addicted.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I know that in the book you didn't just run in the cities that you visited. You did all various sorts of events. Some cities you did sort of triathlons. Some cities had organized events so at the time, so you went in for those, and some didn't. How did you decide on the events?
Yeah, so it was mainly from like whatever I could find online, really. So I'd be kind of like Googling. I usually would start off with like half marathon and see what I could sort of find from there. But then I did realize as I then started to move into thinking, oh, this could potentially be a book, I thought it won't be as exciting if I just kind of say, oh, and then I did another half marathon and then another and then another and another. So I thought perhaps it would be interesting if I started to like vary what I do. And actually I think it was the third chapter was actually when I was going to be in Tokyo. So I was happened to also be going there on holiday, and I thought I'm unlikely to be going back to Japan in the next 3.5 years. And that's where I was sort of like scrambling around thinking, is there a race? It's the peak of summer. Very unlikely that they're going to have a marathon or a half marathon. And I found a running club who said, we're going to do a 5K time trial on one of the days that you're here. Come down to the track and we'll do that, and we'll have it as sort of like your Tokyo race. And so that's where it was also quite nice to then sometimes find different pockets of communities as well to also start running with. And the first running tour actually that I did, so I know that's how we connected, Alan, this summer. But actually, that was off the back of I had found a half marathon to run in Rome for my event, and it was about a week before they emailed. I've had all my flights and my hotels and everything booked, and they emailed saying, "Oh, due to the change in date of the general election or something, we've pushed the race back by a week. Hopefully, that's not a problem." But obviously, I was like, well, I mean, it's quite a big problem given that I don't live in Rome. So then I was scrambling around, like, what else can I do? And that's how I came across a running tour company there. And that sort of introduced me to running tours as well. So yeah, some of them were sort of, I guess there was a need for that one because I was like, well, and Tokyo, I'm going to be in the city. I need to find something to kind of do. And then the rest I would sort of plan, just by research online of like what events are happening throughout the year, when does it fit in with my timetable of when I can kind of get there, and things like that. So that's how I sort of came across them as well. And because I never knew that in Amsterdam they do a city swim through the canals. That was again just sort of like researching like athletic events in Netherlands or in Amsterdam. And then I saw that one and then I was kind of like, that's cool. Like maybe I'll try that instead of running, give the legs a bit of a different rest, I guess, in trying that one. So yeah, it was just through a bit of research and sort of finding out. Some of them, as you probably read, were fairly famous, let's say. So in Sydney, I already knew that the City to Surf race existed. So some of them I knew that like that one is at that time of year and that's what I'd like to do for them. But yeah, some was just pure kind of like Google scramble to find out what's happening where.
So basically, what like one of the criteria was that it had to be like an organized event. Or did you not really have any criteria, but you kind of prefer organized events?
Yeah, no, I didn't really have like a set of criteria. It just had to be most of them. I did ideally want it to be an organized event where it was kind of a race or something like that. But then if I didn't have the opportunity to do that, then just anything that could kind of fit in with my timetable. So I think there were a few that were that was my first running tour, the one that I did in Rome, and then during that 5 weeks off, where I then had the race in St. Louis, and then I was in that area and obviously traveling around and had the time off work. So I combined with Atlanta and Mexico City. Again, those were ones where I had to find like running tours or different groups to kind of run with. And I quite enjoyed it brought a different level, I guess, to where it is the organized events, because typically I'd be running with a smaller group. I'd get to know someone from the city or who's living and working in the city. They may not have been from the city originally, and they give you different tips and tricks. So it sort of changes your experience of the city itself as well. So I quite liked that then there was a bit of a mixture of different things in there for me to experience throughout the whole sort of challenge and journey.
It's interesting hearing about your various events. There are only two events that I've done that are in your book, and that's the Great North Run and the Sydney City to Surf. That we have those in common, essentially on either side of the world.
Yeah, definitely.
One run that I was particularly interested in that made for, I think, quite a good story and ended up coming around again. It was in London, but it ended up coming around again in Rio at the end, was Streaks for Tigers.
Yeah.
Tell us about Streaks for Tigers. I've never heard of this. It sounds like it's raising money for the London Zoo.
Sure, yes, it is. So when I started the challenge, so living and working in London, I was kind of like, well, I've already got that one city, ticked off. And so for those that haven't yet read the book, essentially that chapter, I decided to still theme it around Olympic, and I sort of chose in London because I'd had so many different events. I thought, how can I possibly just pick one to talk about? So I did a decathlon of events that I've done in London. So Some include like London Marathon and different half marathons and things like that. But yeah, you're right. There is this one Streak for Tigers that I did. I think that was in 2013, I think. So the year after the Olympics. And I was on my way to work. So just on the London Underground, I was reading like the free paper. And there was an advert saying, "Are you brave enough to streak for Tigers?" I sort of was like, "Wow, I wonder what that's all about." And what I didn't realize is that it was an advert from London Zoo, and a group of tigers is actually called a streak. And so they'd recently had a tiger enclosure for Sumatran tigers and conservation from the Zoological Society of London. And they wanted people to do a fundraiser for Sumatran tigers to protect them in the wild and conservation and things like that. And so as they're a streak, they were like, "Are you brave enough to streak around London Zoo in order to raise money for it?" And I was obviously feeling very bold when I read this. So I was kind of like, "Yeah, I could do that. That's easy. Like no problem." And I got to work and I logged on and I signed up for my thing. I put it in my diary. And I was kind of like, "Yeah, cool. I don't mind running naked around London Zoo." And then it got to the day of the event, and then I was kind of like, it was like, I remember it being on a Thursday. It was on like a Thursday, and I finished work, and I didn't really tell people at work that I was like, I don't want to tell them just in case, like, I don't do it, and then I'll come into work tomorrow, and everyone will be like, "So did you run naked?" And I'll be like, "No, no, no, I wasn't brave enough." So I didn't really tell anyone, and then I sort of made my way to the zoo, and I was thinking, am I brave enough? And I got to the zoo. I was like, I'll get there and see what happens. And I got there to check in at the zoo and register. And the person that was managing the sort of like check-in desk was like, "Oh, you go through that way. It's about a 300-meter loop, and you'll run around it like 3 times or something like that." I think it was. And they were like, "It will be very clear." And so they said, "Here are your tiger ears." So they gave us little tiger ears to wear, and they said, they were like, "They're the only things that you can wear, obviously, apart from your running trainers. You can keep your trainers on, but you're only allowed to wear your ears and nothing else. And if you want to wear something, unfortunately, you won't be able to participate because we are going to be taking photos and things like that, and we want it to kind of be, the group streaking for tigers." And I was kind of like, "Okay, wow." So like, I literally,
Great. So on top of it, they're telling you that they're gonna take photos of you just to make you feel more at ease with your decision.
Yeah. So they were kind of like, "Yes, there will be cameras, and if you don't want to be seen, then it's probably not the event for you." And so I was kind of thinking, am I brave enough to streak for tigers? And then they followed up by saying, "If you go through that way, we do have a bar. It's free. They're doing shots of alcohol." And I was like, "Great, that's going to help me get to my bravery level." And then they said that, and then they were like, "So if you just go through this way, go into the building, up the stairs, men's changing room to the left, women's to the right." And I was kind of like, what difference does that make? It's kind of a bit irrelevant. Like, I don't really
know at this point, you might as well change in the zoo, because
I know exactly why are we separate. But anyway, okay, that's cool. And they gave you one of the it's the first time actually I've had one of those foil blankets at the beginning of a race. Normally you get to the end of a marathon, half marathon, they give them to you to obviously stop. But then they gave them to you because they were like, "Oh, you can go," I was going to say change, but I guess it's just literally undress. And then you can put that around you whilst you then come down to the waiting area, and you can have some drinks. And they had little tiger cupcakes, I think, that you could eat and stuff like that whilst you wait around until we do the starting. So that's the first time I've ever worn one of those like before a race actually happened. And then I did that, and then sort of came downstairs. I did have a few shots, I will say, from that free bar, and then was feeling bold enough to do the 300 or 600 meters that it was naked around London Zoo. But yeah, I think someone did ask me when I sort of posted about that one on my blog. Someone was like, "Oh, had you ever like run naked before?" And I was like, "Well, no, like it's not really that. I don't think I can really just do my training normally out and about in London with no clothes on. I don't think I would survive the non-arrest from that."
And it ended up being a headline in Rio because you got interviewed by the press. when you
Oh,
were in
that's
Rio.
true. Yeah, I think yes, I'd forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, so when I was in Rio, obviously that was my last then race of like the culmination of like the 23 cities. And yeah, one of the papers had then kind of said, oh, could we come and do an interview with you? And it's quite a famous Brazilian newspaper, O Globo, and I think it's on. I can't remember what page it is. I want to say page 6 or page 5 or something like that. So my team, one of my subsequent teams that I've worked with at Expedia, that quite a few of them were based in Sao Paulo, and they said, oh yeah, it's actually that page is where they have like quirky stories and just fun things, and that's the page that my story was on. And then they'd actually gone out and tried to buy a physical copy of it, and they've got ones for me as well to send over. And I don't speak Portuguese. And then they were laughing when they were talking about it when we were on a call, and they were like, "Do you know what the headline says, Michael?" And I was like, no, like, does it just say something about like running the Olympics and stuff like that? And they were like, no, it says, I've run drunk naked around London Zoo. And I was like, great. I'm so pleased that I've just told all of my Brazilian colleagues to go out and get the paper. And that's the headline. But yeah, it was fun.
I suspect all the Brazilians are proud of you for doing that.
True. It didn't change our working relationship. So yeah, it was good.
So that's it's a good time now, I think, to jump into like how much drinking actually happened on all these trips. I like it seemed like you can tolerate a lot of alcohol, and you actually don't even know what a hangover feels like. So I don't know, like, have you ever like asked Google if it's possible to be, immune to hangovers, or like is there some kind of like genetic trait that could because in your book you said that that you pretty much only got hungover once for 23 minutes.
Yeah, that was a bad moment. That was a bad 23 minutes for me. And I remember the friend that I was traveling with at the time. I'd been to Oktoberfest in Munich, and I had this 23-minute hangover. It was horrendous. And I remember going back to the hotel room, and I said to my friend, or we were on a train, I think, later that day. And I said to my friend, I was like, God, you know what? I know how you feel now when you say you're hungover. And she was like, you absolutely don't. She was like, that is how I feel for like 3 days. And you felt it for 23 minutes. It doesn't count. So she wasn't as sympathetic. Yeah, I kind of put it down to maybe it's just lucky genetics, because yeah, I don't ever really remember my mum or dad ever having a hangover, even when they'd had like a New Year's Eve party or something like that. So maybe there's something that I inherited from them. But I do also think that the running and things like that, I do feel like that probably does help me. So actually, last night was my work Christmas night out. It wasn't particularly wild for me, but we had a fair amount to drink, and then I still went training to a class this morning, before work, and I do kind of feel like the exercise helps me sort of, I guess, in a sense, you sweat it out, and your body kind of burns stuff off a little bit more. Although maybe that's going to change as I progress through my age groups. Who knows? I'll keep you posted on it. I guess the bit where probably not, I wouldn't advocate for this. But when I was racing in LA for that chapter, I'd gone with a couple of friends to LA for a week, and we had some nights staying in West Hollywood. Then I was actually racing in Disneyland, is where my race was actually happening. And then we were going to Venice Beach for a few days after that as a trip. And when we were in West Hollywood, it had been some touristy bits, and then also some shopping and like a bit of hiking in the hills, and then like some sort of like crazy cocktail time. And then I do remember that when I got to the start line of the race in Disneyland, I do remember thinking it was only about 24 hours ago that I was getting home from that night out. That's probably not the ideal prep for a half marathon. But that one actually turned out all right. I placed pretty highly in that one. So, but I wouldn't say that that's how I prepare for them now. That was definitely a one-off, getting carried away in the Hollywood sunshine, I think.
Makes for some good stories though as well. Just switching the subject up a little bit. You're a strong advocate for gay rights and equality. Were you worried about going to Russia? I think it's Sochi, isn't it, in Russia? You know, there's a significant amount of sort of homophobia and aggression versus gays. Did that give you pause for concern?
Yeah, I think at the time, I'd been to Russia before, on holiday, and Stephen, my other half, he'd actually lived in Russia in the mid 90s for 6 months. He'd lived in Moscow while he was working there at one point, and so obviously Moscow was one that, again, like I was saying, when you asked, like, was Stephen excited by them? That was one of the ones where he was like, brilliant, I can't wait to sort of go again and maybe see some of the places that
Okay.
I used to see in the hotel that he'd like worked in as part of the opening team and stuff like that. But leading up to it was when the Winter Olympics in Sochi was happening, and yeah, there was a lot around kind of the human right element, and particularly related to LGBTQ plus community, and what that could mean for people from that community in within Russia. And so it did make me think, like, should I be going there? Is it like safe to go there? Yeah, it did make me think about it a little bit more. And then I'd read an article from another journalist who also was then is part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they'd kind of said, like, we need to also continue the education as well. So by just not being present and not being visible, that's not going to change things in the future. And so that was one of the things that I then, and that she'd written that in the lead up to the Olympics, saying, like, athletes from that community, you should still go and be visible, be present, and that's what kind of gave me probably that extra push to then think, no, I should go, I should do that. And naturally there were things that I had to do differently in terms of how I traveled there, in the sense of you're booking a twin room and things like that. You just have to be sensible in those types of things. But yeah, it did give me a lot of things to think about before, and I guess afterwards as well, for those people in the community that are that live in Russia and are from Russia as well.
I really wanted to know who your coach was, because in the book you mentioned that your coach is a silver medal holder from 2006 in the Melbourne Commonwealth Games, and it's a she. But you never name her, so
I think I name her.
And Alan wants to guess.
Oh, okay.
Who it is.
Yeah, we had a discussion about this, so I figured by process of elimination, and I can edit this out afterwards if my guess is wrong, so I can have a
no. You
a
should
live
keep it
guess
in.
I'm going to guess that it's Joe Pavey.
It's not Joe Pavey. It is.
Sure.
I have met Joe Pavey a couple of times at various different races that she's been running at the same time. She's an incredible athlete and a lovely woman. But no, she's not my coach. Laura Turner is my coach. So I still see her today. And I do my track sessions with her. I think I mentioned her in the sort of acknowledgements at either the beginning or the end, but yeah, I haven't necessarily put her in the chapter itself. So yeah, Laura, she's actually a sprinter originally. So when she was competing in Commonwealth Games and for Team GB, she was 100 and 200 meter sprinter, and that's what she'd won her medal for. And we'd connected. She's from West London, and I live in West London as well, and so as I'd sort of started this challenge, it was actually through this that then I met her, because I then was tweeting my sort of like blog up posts and things like that and sharing them. And then I was probably following slightly more athletes. I feel like London 2012 was also the sort of time when Twitter sort of really erupted, because there was so much kind of like happening and people sharing on that. So I was following a lot more athletes, and it was becoming easier to sort of like connect with people in the public eye, I guess. And so I'd started following her and on Twitter, and she'd kind of liked a few of my posts, like some of my results that I'd kind of posted. And she also then had done a couple of tweets, I think, where it's sort of like bits of words of encouragement of like, well done, on to the next one. And then as I sort of looked at her profile just, one day when she'd done that, I noticed that she'd said that she was starting to do sort of like personal training. And so I emailed her and then just kind of said, hey, I'd be keen to see what benefit I can get from training with someone like you. And we arranged to meet for a coffee to talk about like what my ambitions were, whether it would meet with what she thought that we could, work on together. And that was I want to say that was in like 2014. So that's quite a long time now, and we still meet once a week at the track. And she's definitely helped me think a lot and evolve the way that I run, in the sense of, trying to run more efficiently, picking up my feet more. Whereas before I was just kind of like self-training before her. And she also is the person that's really helped me understand the benefit of, mixing your training as well. You don't just run every day, because like you need to do other strength pieces. You also need to do different types of running sessions. You can't just run 10K and then just continue to improve. And so generally with her, I do a track session, and it's often shorter sprint style. And it's the type of session that I would never do if she weren't there blowing a whistle, making me do it. I would never, like in weeks where she's away traveling maybe, and not available. She sometimes in the past has kind of said, oh, you could still come down to the track and do something similar. I'm like, I'm not going to lie to you. I probably am not going to do that, because I just probably won't do it, and I won't run it as fast as I should when you're here. So yeah, I still very much enjoy training with her.
Yeah, the power of a coach, and also if you can't get a coach or afford a coach, the power of a club, which sort of helps you a little bit in those respects as well.
Absolutely.
We've run together, Michael, so I know you a little bit. You're a very tall person. What on earth prompted you to try one of those tiny capsule hotels in Tokyo when you were in Tokyo?
I guess they're so famous, aren't they? The pod hotels. Then I just was like, just for one night, I definitely want to try it. I probably should have planned it better so that it wasn't the night before that 5K time trial, because as you say, I am quite tall. It was in the middle of summer, as I mentioned just before. So it wasn't the best night's sleep for me, but it was definitely an experience, the one that I would recommend if people are traveling around Japan. It is fun to do. I was quite impressed with, the level of comfort of it, because I did just kind of think it's just going to be like literally the bed and then just a little door, but it did have like its own little TV, like little headphones where you plugged in and stuff. So it did have a lot more comfort than I thought it was going to. But yeah, my height, it didn't necessarily accommodate for that in the best way. So when I go back to Japan in March of next year, I have the Tokyo Marathon, which is what I'm training for right now. I've just booked all of my hotels actually this week, and I haven't put a pod hotel in there, but I feel like I've done it now. It was fun. It was good. I'd recommend it to anyone for the first time. But yeah, I'm not revisiting it on this trip.
Okay, so basically it's one of those things like you recommend doing it once, but maybe not more than once. Is that right?
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of like an experience. I was like, okay, I've kind of ticked it off now. So that was cool. Glad I did it. Recommend it, but this time, yeah, I'm staying in a hotel room where I can actually stand up and get dressed.
Okay, that's fair. Out of all the cities that you ended up running in, did you have a favorite, or one that you said that you'd go back to one day?
Yeah, I really struggle with that question. So it's like a one that everyone often asks. I think with all of the cities, I genuinely loved being in all of them, and I would visit all of the cities again, because I do travel a lot, as you were saying at the beginning, in the introduction. I really enjoy it, and I always think there's always something good about everywhere, whether it's like people that you've met, whether it's food, whether it's architecture, whether it's something, there's always something great. But with the actual races and things that I did, a couple that kind of stick in my mind that I really loved. So was City to Surf. I really enjoyed that. And I think that, I mean, it's just so huge. Alan, you were saying you've done it, so you know how big a field it is. So it's incredible being in an event for that many people and feeling that energy, and particularly when there's that part of Heartbreak Hill, as they call it. It is a bit heartbreaking. It does go on forever, it feels like, but then you're rewarded with that view back of the harbour, and you see the Opera House and the bridge, and that was just fantastic. So, and then you kind of then finish like coming down onto Bondi Beach. What a finish that is, to then, you know, be able to kind of cool off in the sea, was pretty cool. So that was one that sticks in my mind. And the other one that I often think of is Stockholm. And I really, really loved that. And it's just such a beautiful city. And it was an amazing day weather-wise, like bright blue sky. The course kind of like took us through various different islands within the archipelago, and it was just a fantastic event, and I just really, really enjoyed it. So those are two that I think that stick in my mind for, you know, really positive reasons. There are a couple that were a bit more challenging. I would say that the one in Helsinki, which was only like 7 days later after Stockholm, that one was a bit harder because it was really raining a lot during that one. when you're kind of racing in the rain for quite a long time and hanging out in it, that can be a bit more difficult, but was still like a scenic place to kind of like run through. But Stockholm, Sydney, they're two of my favorites that I hope one day to be able to race those two events again.
Was there anything in any city that kind of, rather than it be your favorite, that surprised you in some way, that wasn't what you expected or was unusual?
Probably one of the things that surprised me more in, I guess, with the Rio one, that was a 10K race. Weather-wise, that really like took me a bit by surprise. I kind of thought, oh, it's going to be hot, but I didn't expect it to be that humid and that misty, and like you couldn't really see the mountains and Sugarloaf Mountain and things like that. That sort of surprised me. And I do remember that in that one as well, in terms of the people sort of racing it, there was a man who was running barefoot as well on the roads in Rio. So that one did surprise me a little bit. Thinking back to some of the others, I don't think there was any that sort of out of the organized events where I kind of thought, oh, this seems disorganized or anything like that. I didn't have any kind of bad surprises in that sense at all. No, not for any of the organized ones. No.
One of the things I noticed looking at your times, you seem to be a very regular half marathon runner. You did a lot of half marathons, and you seem to be. This is kind of a personal note outside of the book a little bit. You seem to be a much faster 5K and half marathon runner than Liz and I. Liz and I are very similar sort of speed runners, and we were both going, "Woo, those are fast times."
Yeah, we were like, I want to run a half marathon that fast.
Yeah. But we noticed as well that you were sort of challenging yourself for a sub 3 hour marathon in the book, which is exactly what we're doing. So it kind of calls to us a little bit because we've been setting ourselves a target of trying to run sub 3 hour marathons. But it seemed to be in the book, it seemed to be eluding you. Is it still eluding you, or have you achieved that yet, or is that one of the future challenges?
No, I haven't achieved it. I've done 3 hours, 3 minutes twice, is my closest that I've got. So both of them I think were in the book. So the one where I went to Seoul in Korea for that race, that's where I hadn't necessarily thought at the time going into that one that I would get under 3 hours. I did 3:03, and then off the back of that I then qualified for London Marathon. So then I did 3:03 again. I think I was 11 seconds quicker in London, but every second counts, right? So it was getting closer to that 3:02. And then as like off the back of this, I guess, so I did that London Marathon, and then someone then said to me, oh, you've qualified for Boston. And I didn't even really know about like the qualifying for Boston. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should do that then as well. So I kind of, put my hat in for that one. And then I started realizing of the six majors, and the challenge that people would get for the 6 stars and things. So then I started on that challenge as well. And then as I then got my place at Berlin, that was the one that I'd read about where everyone was like, oh, that's the ultimate. Like if you're going to get your fastest run, that's where it's going to be. And it's super flat, super fast. I'd done some other marathons in between, London and Boston and Seoul. I'd been sort of hovering around 307, 310, that type of thing. And then, so I went all in for the training for Berlin with Laura, like came up with a plan of like what we were going to do. And actually then I kind of like gave up drinking for like 3 months, and I was like really dedicated. And then actually it was one of my worst performing ones that I've had. I feel like I put too much pressure, and I guess I just didn't really respond to it. And I think I did in the end something like, I think it was 3 hours 13 or 3:14 or something like that. So it was, the worst one that I had done. And I think that when I'd started to feel very tired and my legs felt like they weighed about 2,000 kilos each, in the last sort of 5 kilometers, I was so panicked and looking at like my watch and, oh no, but I'm falling behind and I've got to, and I was just wasting so much energy. I think that's just where it just was all a bit too much. So then I haven't really focused on it as much as I did leading up to that. Actually, when it was March 2020, I then was going to be doing the Tokyo Marathon, and that was going to be my 6th star. And so I was just kind of like going in for it, done all my training. And as we know, in March 2020, this thing called COVID came along and the race was cancelled. And luckily, I'd been in touch with the Los Angeles Marathon, who then said, hey, you can have a last minute place here if you wanted to travel to Los Angeles. And at the time, the COVID thing had been sort of just something that was happening in Asia Pacific. And so I was like, sure, yeah, I'll come to LA and I'll race. It feels like that was the last event on the planet before we went into lockdown. I think the race was on 9th of March 2020. So it seems crazy now, sort of thinking back to it. But I did a 3:05 and I qualified for Boston again. And so I feel like I actually get closer to the 3-hour target when I put less pressure on it. So actually, as I've gone into this training for Tokyo again, so my place was deferred. So fingers crossed, March 2023 is when I'll get my 6th star. I'm not actually even wearing a watch at the moment when I'm training. I'm just kind of doing my sort of 30K runs and running how I feel, and seeing how that works out. I'm not saying that I'm hoping for a sub 3 hours, but let's see how I respond to it on the day by just not having the distraction of watches and things like that. And maybe it will work. I'm not sure. I was lucky enough to a few years ago train in Kenya with I think you've interviewed him on this podcast, Darren and Finn. So I went with him to Kenya for a couple of weeks training. And I remember that was one of the things when he would be talking to different athletes in Iten where we were, and he would be like, look, notice that they're not wearing watches and they don't really focus on that the same way that we would. Now, I'm not saying we're going to perform anywhere near as good as those Kenyan athletes, but yeah, who knows? Maybe one day I'll get below 3. That's the thing, I guess. Like on paper, as you were saying with my half marathon, I feel like that's my peak sort of performance, because on paper, yes, I've done a 1 hour 19. I think this year I did my fastest half marathon was 1:21. So on paper, I should be able to take a bit of the edge off that and then still complete by sort of 2 hours 59. But it's eluded me so far. So I'll keep you posted. And you two, you're both training for it at the moment, or you've achieved it already, or?
Alan's achieved it, but I haven't. So the marathon is heartbreaking because, sometimes like everything seems to go right and then it doesn't materialize in that time in the race. So it's kind of a different beast.
Yeah.
I think what you say about kind of holding your ambition too tightly. We talk about in our training discussions, we talk about trying to run with a quiet mind. So not having a watch, all of those kind of things help you to do that. And not be too obsessed about focusing on 2 seconds off pace. All of this stuff, you're just burning energy and tensing up, and none of that helps you. Probably, when you least expect it, you probably run, 2:57 or something like that, because your half marathon times are quite capable. It's just a question of getting yourself into the right flow state for that.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. And yeah, you're right, Liz, that it's a bit of an unknown all the time, isn't it? Going into a marathon, it's a long way. It's a lot that can happen depending on the day. I do always it makes me smile when people sort of ask, "Oh, where are you racing next?" And I might say, "Oh, which city?" And people are like, "Oh, is that a hard marathon?" I'm like, "They're all hard. They're all they're all very long." I understand that there are some that have a different level and degree of difficulty, but they're definitely all hard because they're all a long way.
We talk about fast marathons rather than hard marathons, because all marathons are hard. Some are faster than others.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just ask you, do you have a place where you prefer people get the book if they're interested in getting a copy for themselves?
So no, I don't have a preferred. So I think they can go online. So either on Amazon is often people's easiest place, I guess. Or there are other places, sort of more local ones in UK, like Waterstones or Barnes and Noble. But I don't have a preferred one. So wherever people choose to buy it is good. They can either buy a physical copy or the ebook is there as well.
And you're always up to something, it seems, and you're still up to quite a few shenanigans. So where can people follow you, Michael Long, if they want to see what you're up to?
Yeah, so I guess easiest place is on Instagram. So my handle is just at longm20, so LONGM20, the letter. And then generally I'll sort of like post all my travels on there and race results and things like that. That's probably the best place to kind of get most up-to-date stuff. Or LinkedIn if they want to. I'm always happy to connect on there as well.
And is there something that you're planning or something you want to share that you're up to right now?
So I guess the biggest one right now is trying to get that 6-star. So hopefully I'd wanted to kind of like do that before I was 40. So it was almost working out because I turned 40 in June 2020. And so if I'd had the race in March 2020, it would have worked out. But more important things happened in the world than just me getting the 6-star. So it'll still be really special. And that's partly also why I think I've decided not to run with the watch, because I also want to really celebrate that and just be able to enjoy the day. So that's kind of like the biggest one coming up. I did say to Stephen, I was like, and that's it then, I'm going to retire from like competitive marathons. And he was like, no, you won't. And I was like, I won't. And then he was like, so you don't want to do any more? And I was like, oh, well, there's just 2 more things. Like, yeah. He was like, see, I knew it. So I'd always kind of thought that like the one that I would quite like to do for sort of my sort of like swan song from like competitive running was the Marathon de Medoc, the one in Bordeaux, which is then got the different vineyards every sort of mile or so that people can kind of meet at. So Stephen's definitely up for that one because he does enjoy a bit of wine as well. So I would quite like to do that one at some point. I know there are rumors of, or there's going to be a potentially a 7th star. So I guess if I have 6 and they add a 7th, I guess I will then, be lured into that of kind of going, oh, well, no, I've got to do at least one more. And the other thing that I was reading about recently was the Olympics is coming up in Paris in 2024 is the next Summer Olympic Games. And so the marathon they're going to actually open to the public. So where the elites will have their race, but then once they've kind of all set off, there'll be a bunch of people that will be able to apply and be, I guess, as regular civilians racing in the time. So that would be pretty cool to be part of that. if I could be. I mean, everyone's, I'm sure, wanting to be part of it, but that would be amazing if I could be part of that. So yeah, potentially a few other things that I've sort of got on my radar that I would like to achieve at some point. I have a few years ago got a world record, and then I'm always kind of in the back of my mind, I'm like, if someone beats it, would I try and beat it again and claim it back? That I feel like I sort of say, oh no, but I could always then say I was a former world record holder, but I feel like the competitor within me would be like, no, I want that back. So
And what's the world record?
so for it's the running the fastest half marathon dressed as a swimmer.
Oh.
Yeah, so I did that in London in 2019. I think the current record at the time had been 1 hour 39. My record is 1 hour 29. I hope nobody listening is then going to go, oh, maybe I could beat that.
Oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
Well, it depends though. You know, we all say that, but then like, what do you have to wear?
Well, so yeah,
in terms of the swimming.
so you do. It is quite strict of what you have to wear. So you have to just wear a speedo, and then you can obviously wear trainers. You have to have like the armbands, so the floats on, a swimming cap, a mask, and a snorkel as well. So you have to have that. You don't have to breathe through the snorkel. You can just have that attached to your head. So they are quite strict on that's what you've got to wear. I do have some in the tank that I could race it quicker. The reason I'd kind of gone for that time is that I had to have 2 witnesses that saw me race the whole thing together. So I paced with the 1 hour 30 paces. And then I ran slightly ahead of them at the very end. So they were 2 of my 2 key witnesses. So I guess I do have a quicker time within me if I was willing to run with like a GoPro on my head as well, I guess, because I think that's how they do it. So maybe let's see, or maybe I would just be satisfied to say I was once a world record holder. I'm good with that.
Yeah, records are there to be broken.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are still not successful by sort of a year over the next year of your 3-hour marathon, you can come and have a try with us if you want. We're probably lining up to have a good kick at the sub 3-hour marathon in October 2023 at the Petit Train du Nord, which is a trail, slightly downhill, fast trail marathon in Quebec. Quite known for its speed, but it's a kosher course. It's a Boston qualifier, and we're looking at lining that up for our next quick marathon attempt in October 23. So
okay, definitely.
And it's theoretically a trail, but it's a gravel. It's like a gravel bike path. So it's not a trail like with roots and things.
Okay.
Which would slow you down.
It's well renowned to be fast. I think it does almost one of the most Boston qualifiers of any marathon.
Oh, really?
And it's always sold out, but we know the organizers, so we would try and get you a special entry if you need one. So let us know.
Oh, thank you. No, that would be great. See, Stephen's away for work at the moment. He's going to come back, and I'll be like, and just one other one that we just need to go to Canada for. So yeah, that would be great. I'd love that.
Yeah, and being October 1st, like the leaves are usually changing colors.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Look it up on the website.
I will.
I was just gonna say the leaves haven't fallen yet. They've just changed color. So it's October 1st. They used to have it a little later, but then it was like really too cold. So October 1st seems to be kind of a sweet spot where it's, it's like it's cool. So, you're going to be cold at the start, but it's a good marathon performance running temperature.
Okay, great. No, I definitely will stay in touch on that one. And the scenery, I think that's going to be how I'm going to sell it to Stephen. I'm sure that's going to be my way of kind of then saying we've got to go. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice because it's like an old railroad that they took the rails away and they made it a bike path, and it was gravel, but they've since started paving sections of it. So there'll be some paved sections as well, but it's still like it's all tree cover.
Oh, nice.
So it's really nice.
That's fantastic. and good temperature because yeah, the two times that I've run in Canada, so the Montreal race that I did, as you will have read in the book, that was -12, I think, or -13. And then when I came running with you, Alan, this summer, it was really hot. So I've had the two extremes. So I
Yes,
guess
it
this will
was.
be
Mhm.
somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think this year that race had like 4 degrees at the start or something like that, like 4 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, going to about 10, so it's pretty good for racing.
You need to keep warm at the start, but once you've started, you're pretty okay. I actually went into the race results for the hypothermic half because I used to live downtown and I used to do it most years, and I was just kind of curious to see like if I had done it the year that you did it, but
Oh, did
I
you?
didn't. I checked the results. My name wasn't
Oh
there.
no. Oh, that's such a shame.
Yeah. I thought like, oh, maybe we had met.
That would have been amazing.
I'm pretty sure that I did the hypothermic half marathon the same year as you, except I did the Ottawa race.
Oh,
So I was
really?
actually,
Oh,
yeah, I was actually in a different place.
Oh, that's
So,
cool.
but it's all good.
yeah. So to make you feel better, that hypothermic half was pretty much the standard experience. Like that race is always freezing, and you know you're lucky when you don't have either a snowstorm right before or like ice pellets hitting you in the face. Like there was one year it had kind of like ice rained, and so it was a sheet of ice hidden underneath like a few inches of snow, and it was just treacherous. Like people were sliding all over the place, and you have to do like 3 loops of the same thing, so
Yeah.
you know that you're coming back for that section that took you forever to run.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It
Yeah.
was certainly an experience that one for sure. And I do remember when I went to pick up my race number in Montreal, they'd kind of said, "Oh, have you got your ID?" And I gave over my passport. And when they took it, they were like, "Well, you're from London, England. We thought that like your name was like London, Ontario. Like it's very unusual for people to
Mm-hmm.
travel all the way over." But yeah, I did love that race. But there was one point where I thought of it actually when I was doing my training run this weekend because it's quite cold here in England at the moment, and my thumb had started to get a little bit cold. And so I kind of like put it under my armpit as I was running for a little while, and that's I had to do that in the hypothermic half marathon in Montreal because it was freezing. But yeah, a
Mm-hmm.
great race. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's really well organized and everything. It's just very cold every year.
So, just a summary of the Mock Olympian by Michael Long. First of all, a great and crazy travelogue adventure with high running and Olympic focus. So, that would be my sort of potted phrase for it. I love the quick facts about each Olympics or Olympic host that you give at the start of each chapter. So you find out that, for example, Antwerp in 1920 was the first appearance of the Olympic flag. You find out that Helsinki Stadium was actually built in 1942 before the war, but it had to wait for the whole Second World War to finish until it could host the Olympics in 1952, etc. I'm a nerd, so I like to collect facts like that. I liked some of the more unusual events you did when the big city half marathon was not available at the time, etc. So things like you mentioned the Amsterdam Canal swim sounded pretty funky. The Montreal hypothermic that we've just spoken about in the Canadian winter, and the epilogue brings the whole book around full circle with a photo of Michael as a kid running in Greece with his little boyish looks in Athens and bringing the whole Olympic events around full circle. A fun and easy book to read and very entertaining. And I would hope that the podcast that we've just done sort of catches the flavor of that a little bit. Highly recommended.
I guess I'll add that this book is for anyone that enjoys hearing about crazy adventures that runners devise for themselves as goals, but it's not a detailed account of the preparation that went into every run. The story around each race highlights the things Michael did in each city, including running, and features some anecdotes and people he met along the way. So those are always fun. Although it's not a book that's meant to teach the audience, I actually did learn quite a bit with those little comments at the beginning. But also I learned that it's possible for someone to be immune to hangovers, which I didn't know before. And in terms of physical appearance, the book has a fun cover picture featuring the Earth with a runner and some iconic landmarks around the outside. It actually kind of reminds me of the tiny planet photos that you can get with those Insta360 cameras. So it's a really fun cover art. And the book is thin and the chapters are short, so it's a quick read. But beware, you will need to know some runner jargon because Michael uses words like iso drink. And sometimes there's no explanation. But if you're a runner, that doesn't really matter because you'll know exactly what he's talking about. If you like the photos that are included in books, then this book does have photos included, but they're black and white. So it would have been nice to have some color, but we definitely appreciate the photos.
So all that remains to say is thanks, Michael, for your time and for running with me back in Montreal and for talking with us today and providing us with copies of your book so we can have this chat.
Thank you very much. No, I really appreciate talking to you. I've really enjoyed it and great to get you to know you both a bit more. And I look forward to running with you in 1st of October next year for the sub 3 hours.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do it.
Yes. Wow, we got a whole group now.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thank you to Michael for providing a review copy of the book and for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like for us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends about us or share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if this is how you listen to your podcast. You can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. We're now on Buy Me a Coffee as well, where you can buy us a coffee, or you can just go to our Buy Me a Coffee page for free and and listen to the few cool little extras that we've posted. Bye for now.
Bye for now.